cutouts for me probably started, not quite, everyone kind of thinks it started in Rome, but it wasn't quite in Rome. It happened actually probably at the end of my MA, which was in Birmingham, about 1992, many, many moons ago. But my father was dying, and then to travel backwards and forwards to Ireland was a very difficult thing. I think it took me by surprise, and I remember coming back after he died. He died August the 24th, and I remember coming back and looking at the work, and I realised every painting I had done was totally about that experience. And I think for me, throughout my life, my painting and what goes on in my life is reflected in the work. You can see when you go around. I think people that know me kind of understand and see things, and I think it goes right back to from when I first started painting. For me, to paint is often to tear things down and to destroy. And I set forward to destroy every single painting I had made on my MA, and I just tore them apart and just binned them, basically. And I thought, I have 2 weeks to make a show for this MA, and I found all the BA students had gone, and I'm not very precious about paintings, so I thought they weren't either. And they'd left paintings behind, so I kind of they'd all big canvases, and I started cutting them up, and hence that was probably the first cutouts as such. And for me, for the 2 weeks as well, how I paint always, right back, is I have to get to that point where everything is, you're geared up over the year, 2 years, whatever, and then you just have a switching off point. And this was my switching off point. I needed them to stand, so they gave me resin, and I had these big stand-up, big cutouts, and they were all of kind of mourning figures and figures in groups, very Gaia-esque, very kind of El Greco, two of my all-time favourite painters. Sometimes you make a work that you're not in that frame of mind, you're not in that space that you can work with it. It's probably 10 years behind where you are at, or 10 years ahead of where you're at. And I think for the cutouts, I never thought about them again. And then you're just trying to get on and make some work and try to make a living in London. And I was painting, and it's and painting is something that, I'm very driven, always have been, to paint. And of course, as you get older and people fall by the wayside, you wonder, I've had these conversations with friends, what kind of keeps you going and stuff. And I think I'm quite blinkered when it comes to just surviving. And for me, it's my way, and always has been, my way of talking about things that matter to me. I love drawing. Drawing is very essential to my work. And I use clay as a matter to draw with. And I used to, like many years ago, actually, I'd have paintings, and I'd have painting problems, and I would actually use the clay to draw with and actually make the painting. And with me, I can never do anything twice. It would be totally different. It would become something else. I applied for some residencies, and I wasn't very successful. And so I thought to myself, I'll create my old residency, which just meant me going to Margate for a few weeks and getting a studio. But I needed to feel like I was somewhere else and thinking differently, and so I would approach the work differently. And again, it's a little bit like, when I was on the MA, things got thrown out to create room, physical room and mental room, to bring some other things in. And then, as luck would have it, I'm on this lucky residency in Margate of my own creation, and I got a fellowship in Rome. And so Rome was amazing, but I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to sit in a studio making oil paintings. I'll do that at home sometime. So and as I said, drawing is incredibly important to me. I'm just going to start wandering the city and just start drawing. And I just started drawing, and it's how I understand a place or people is to draw. I started doing these big watercolours. We all think, make the big painting, make the big oil painting, whatever. So I started making, because they're going to go into this show, I'm going to do a wall of these watercolours. And of course, as I'm making them, there's more sketchbooks. And of course, at the back of the sketchbook, there's card. So I'm sitting in bed, watching the film, waiting for the door, there's a party to happen, something to happen, yeah. And I'm cutting the sketchbooks up, and I'm laying them around. And it was quite direct to begin with. It could have been a statue from, the Barberini, or it could have been a painting, a Caravaggio painting. It could have been a moment in a club. It could have been a moment in the street, a duck in the street. They were all fragments of thoughts and movement through the city. And so I just started cutting them up, because I'm also really into green at the moment, as I should be forever, okay? And just recycling and taking it back into, using up these cards. I thought, well, I'll just stand them around. And I had them standing around the studio, and then people would come in, I'm showing them my watercolours. Have you seen my etchings? Have you seen my watercolours? And of course, all they had eyes for are these cutouts, you know? So, and it is, for all of us in work, is like, that's how you start seeing your work, is through other people's eyes. So then, you know, Hastings asked me to do a show here, because they went from being Hastings Jerwood to Hastings Contemporary, and they rang me up, and I was very excited. It was such a great, you know, opportunity. And I have to say, they have been amazing, you know, from beginning to end. They did a studio visit. They knew the work. They talked to me about things. But they just gave me a free hand. I think they had viewed shows, and I think because they're changing and they're opening up the program and they're trying things out, I think they took a chance, and you know, it was such an opportunity. We discussed things, but right to the last minute, I'd measured everything, and I knew what I wanted to do with the tables. I knew what I wanted to do with things, but the space I had to make the work was just quite amazing. The tables needed to be staggered. Again, going back to the Green Grassy show, I wanted people to, the work staggered, so there's no long line. It meant you're coming into a garden, Earthly Delites, coming from the Hieronymus Bosch, in a very simple way, coming from the Hieronymus Bosch title, which is an amazing painting, you know, full of people doing lots of things with very dark kind of overtones. I use the old-fashioned delight spelling, probably because I speak quite an old-fashioned English, but also it's a bit rock and roll, and it looks good in my poster outside. I thought, yeah, that'll work. Yeah. And then it reflects, there's a lot of different, you know, the imagery comes from the imagery. There's even cowboys, someone said to me, creeping in. And as you said, I said, somebody said to me, because sometimes when I'm involved with a lot of work, you don't know, you start off with something, you know what you're cutting out, like a deposition here. And so I start and I'll cut that out. But then, of course, there's 3 or 4 paintings on the go, and then I spot something else and a bird will go in, or a hallucinogenic dream, and there's people crawling, and there's a hole here, so something else, there's a woman wrapped around that hole. So the holes are as important, and they suggest ideas. So, and what I'm bringing to mind when I'm working is the things I'm interested in. Most of the work here is card, and is layered card, and acrylic, and there's some oil as well. And then I started making some metal ones, because everyone worries, they won't endure, they won't do this. I'm thinking, well, they're here, it's all right. So, but also I love the idea that using the metal, like that one down there is metal. I can get the height. I'm thinking of making them stand more and making them bigger. I can get more of a height in them. But then, of course, I'm really sensitive to materials I use, because I thought I'd use clay, and it would become, I'd make clay versions of these. But I understand materials, well, insofar as I learned by using them, and I draw with them. And the clay just did something different. So that's starting to go off somewhere else. The idea for here was set up on the tables. So, I mean, I've seen people with their heads stuck in here, you know, and looking at things and finding things. And because there's quite a lot of work. And then you're looking at her, and next thing you see a guy with a hat down there, and next thing you're moving. And I'm hoping to get people more and more. And it excites me so much that people will look at painting. I think, for me, it's like one of the best things you can do in the world. I think it's a wonderful thing. Every time I have a show, I think this is for all of us, I always have something in it that I'm not maybe quite totally sure about, and I'm going to learn from it. I mean, you should learn from your own shows each and every time.